Hey class, hope everyone is doing well today. I am so sorry that I am not there with you in person. I am super bummed to be missing a day with you, but we are going to continue our learning. So, welcome to our virtual math class. I will be going through our lesson just as if we were in class together. Now, a few reminders before we begin. Please watch the entire video using headphones. I recommend pausing if you need more time to copy something down or rewinding if you get distracted and miss something. That's the beauty of a video class. So don't be afraid to use that pause button or rewatch this as many times as you need. Next, please copy everything you see me write. Just like in class, whatever I write in my notes, you should be copying in your notes. You should have a copy of the notes packet that the sub gave you. If you do not, please ask for it now. Homework will be assigned and will be due the next class, so please check Veracross for that assignment. And lastly, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me. As a reminder, my email is agoldberg@oapb.org. All right, so let's get started. Go ahead and put your notes in front of you. They should look like this. Again, if you don't have a copy, go ahead and ask the sub for it. If for some reason you don't get a copy of this, go ahead and copy it down on your own sheet of paper as best you can. Let's get started. Today we are diving into Chapter 1 and we are doing Chapter 1, Section 2. This is all about place value, names for numbers, and reading tables. This lesson might be a little bit of a review for some of you, but it might have been a while since you learned this. So it's important that even if it sounds familiar, you still pay close attention because we're getting into the nitty-gritty details here in pre-algebra. Now, before we start taking any notes, let's just fix a little silly typo that we have. Up here it says pre-algebra A. Go ahead and cross that out and just replace it with a B. Alrighty, that's just silly. Now, place value. You may already understand what place value is, but as a reminder, the name kind of tells us. It tells us about the location, the place of this number, whatever digit it is. So the position of that digit within the bigger number. So for example, we have here the number 1,083,664,500. Now, if we didn't have place value, this would be 1,083,664,500, and it wouldn't mean anything. We wouldn't know that that number was bigger than 5. But once we use place value, we can understand the true value of a number, how much it really is worth. So that place value, that position inside the bigger number is super important. Now, an example of this is the 2 6s shown up here. Everyone underline them. Those 2 6s. Now, without place value, we might think they're the same number. They're both a 6. It might seem obvious. But because of place value, we understand that the 6 in this column represents 6 10,000s, 6 groups of 10,000. So that's 60,000. And this 6 represents 6 groups of 100,000, 600,000s. That's a lot different than 60,000. If I go to the bank and I say, hey, can I have $600,000 for my bank account? And they give me 60,000, I'm not going to be too happy. I got gypped. But if they say, hey, I want 60,000 out of my bank account and they give me 600,000. Well, that's awesome. I got some extra money. But you see how the difference of that value matters. It makes a big difference. So the two sixes shown here, they represent different amounts. Different amounts. All right. So moving on, let's find the place value of the digit 8 in each of these whole numbers. So the digit 8 is an 8, right? It's worth 8 ones. But when it's in a different location or position in the bigger number, then it has a different value. So let's see here. What place value is this 8 in? If we're not sure, let's count them out. I highly recommend that you memorize this place value if you haven't already. So here we have the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, millions. So this number would be in the millions. That means that 8 is not worth just 8 ones, it's worth 8 millions. We would write that as 8 0 0 0 0 0 0. Now let's move on to the next one. 67,890. In your head, I want you to tell yourself what that place value is before we say it together. All right, let's count it out. These are the ones, tens, hundreds. That 8 is in the hundreds. Now, you might be thinking, hey, this seems super simple. Okay, yes, it is. But you know what? I still see a lot of mistakes happen just from silliness. So when you're working on a question that might seem simple, you still want to be careful, because when things seem simple, that's when we get a little rushed or a little super confident and we don't look out for those mistakes. So make sure you're counting out your place values so you don't accidentally mistake the wrong position. The last one, go ahead and count it out on your own. Decide what place value is that 8 in. I'll give you a second. Alrighty, let's see together. It is the ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. All right, so those are our place values. Let's talk about how we can write different numbers. When we are writing a number in standard form, think of what the word standard means. It kind of means like normal, average, the usual. The commas, so that's important. We're not in English class, but we still want to pay attention to our commas. A math teacher might argue that sometimes they're even more important than in English class. Don't tell your English teachers I said that. But it's because they help us identify our place value super quickly. Without the commas, we've got to count it out each time. But with the commas, we can identify the different periods. And that helps us quickly figure out what place value we are in. Now, these commas separate the digits of a number into groups of 3. And each group of 3 is called a period. So let's look back up at that chart we have up here. See how it's labeled periods? These are your 4 periods. First, we have the ones period. Ones, tens, hundreds. But after we get to 100, once we get to 999, we add one more, we jump up to the thousands period. That includes our thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. Notice how now the period is included in the name of each place value. So that's why looking at the period can help us quickly identify the place value we're in. When there is no period it is the ones place. The ones period is the only, not the ones place, when it is the ones period, sorry. The ones period is the only period that does not include the period name in the place value. But let's continue. So we have the 100,000s, then we jump up to the millions period. That includes millions, 10 millions, and 100 millions. And lastly, the billions. That's the billions, 10 billions, and 100 billions. So now let's review those down below. The first period we talked about are the ones, or is the ones period. Then we have the thousands period. That's your thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s. Next up is the, what is it? The millions period. And lastly, in this list is the billions period. Now, why does our notes say the first 4 periods? Well, that's because we can have numbers bigger than the billions. But these are the most common, so these are the 4 that I expect you to know. Alrighty? Go ahead and flip to the next page of your notes. We are going to move on now to writing whole numbers in words. This chapter is going to teach us how to represent our numbers in multiple ways. So what we just went over was how to represent our numbers in standard form. We use commas and place value and digits to represent those numbers. Now we're going to talk about how to translate that into words. Now, just like in English, when we want to translate it to another language or turn it into another language, we translate it. For example, translating English to Spanish or Spanish to English. Well, math is kind of like its own language. So we are going to learn how to translate our numbers. This is important because next year you will be translating entire equations. So write the whole numbers in words. To do this, we write the number in each period, those periods we just learned, followed by the name of that period. Now, which period name is usually not written? Do you remember what I said on the last page? It is the ones period. It's usually not written. For example, let's look at this number. 10836645500. Now, that's how we would read it without place values. Now, to put it into words, you're going to write it the same way you would read it out loud, starting left and going right. So first we have to recognize our periods. We've got the ones. Let's label it as best you can. Then we've got the thousands. Then we've got the millions. And then we've got the billions period. Now, that's important to remember because that's going to tell us how to write each piece of our number. So first we have a 1 in the billions position, so we write that as 1 billion. Then we have an 83 in the millions place value or period. So we write that as 83 million. Notice how I'm just taking the number 83 and putting it in front of the period we're in. The next period is the thousands, and the number is 664. 664,000. And lastly, we have the number 500, and that's in the ones period. But remember, we don't say the ones or write the ones, so we would just write 500. Notice how I read each group of threes. That's how I identified my periods and the numbers I would write before that period. So, a helpful hint, please make sure you're noticing the commas after the name of each period when you're writing it out. So I would write this number as 1 billion, comma, 83 million, comma, 664 thousand, comma, 500. That's what I am going to be looking for on your homework and your tests or quizzes. Now, the name of the ones period is not used, so remember that. The rest of the periods are. So now we're going to translate each standard form number written here into word form. Starting with this first number. Go ahead and read it out loud to yourself. Whisper if you're in class. So you should have said 54. Now I don't see any commas, so that's 54 in the ones period. So I'm going to write it out, 54. Next up, read it out loud. And then go ahead and write it on the line. Let me see if you get it correct when we check it together. I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. Alrighty, let's do it together. You should have written 72. 72. Next up, we have 6, 7, 8. How would we write that? Well, I don't see any commas, so I'm just going to write 678. Notice I'm only hyphenating numbers up to the two-digit numbers in the ones period. So we have 678. Why is it important that we're writing these numbers in word form? Well, think about if you've ever seen a check, a bank check. Now, to complete a bank check and actually pay someone money or receive money, then you have to write the value that you're paying in standard form, but also word form. It's a security measure. So someone doesn't just erase and change your standard form number. So when you give them the check, instead of paying them 200, they change it and you're paying 2,000. So that's why we always write it in word form. Now you might be saying, I've got Apple Pay. I don't need to write a check. Well, believe it or not, there are definitely still times where you have to write a check. So it's very important to know how to. So the next one, let's go ahead and write it together. This one has a comma now. These did not. So now we're moving into another period other than the ones. What period are we in? The thousands. And what number is it? 9. So we're going to write 9,000, comma, put a comma where you see a comma in the standard form. And then the next part is 265. So that's what I'm going to write. 265. Next up, we now have 2 digits in front of the comma. But it's still only 1 comma. So we're still in the thousands period, but now it's 93,000. So let's write that down. 93,000, comma, 205. There was a 0 there, so it's not 25, it's not 250. And to be proper, we aren't going to say 205. We're just going to say 205. Now the last one is a little bit bigger. Now I see 2 commas. So I'm no longer just in the thousands period. I've now moved up to what period? The millions period. So I'm going to read the first chunk, the first 3 numbers. That's 308. So that's what I'm going to write. 308. And then I write the period name. We said this was the millions period. So it's 308 million, comma. The next part, well, a 0. Don't let that confuse you. Just look at that chunk by itself. If you have to, go ahead and cover it with your pen or pencil or your fingers. And you'll see that it's really just 63. But it's in the thousands period, so it represents 63,000. Now there's a comma, so we put our comma and we move over to the next period, the ones period. So I remember, oops, I'm not going to write the period name this time because now I'm in the ones period. So I'm going to just read my number, 557. So that's what I'm going to write. 557. Now, we're missing something. Look back at that last one. Remember we said if it's a 2-digit number like 65, 52, 17 doesn't count, but 23, something over 20, but less than 100, we're going to write it with a hyphen, and we forgot that hyphen, so let's add it in. 63,557. Now, let's check and make sure we're understanding this before we move on. So ask yourself, true or false, when writing a check for this amount, the word name we would write for the dollar amount is 2,060. Well, I see a 2, a 6, and a 0, 2 zeros. Maybe, but let's look at the periods. However, oops, there's no comma, so it's a little bit harder for me to see my period. I've got to count them out. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. So there should be a 2 in front of the word thousand, and there is, so that part's right. But then we look at the ones period. That's not a 60. There's 2 zeros after it. That's 600. They said 60. So this is false. If I tell you you owe me this amount and you only pay me $2,060, I'm going to be a little bummed out because you did not pay me the full amount. So instead, we would write this as 2,000. And what would come next? 600. Awesome. All right, finish copying this down, and then we are going to flip to the next page. If you need to pause and have more time to write, take your time. Go ahead and use that pause button. Okay, now moving on, let's talk about another way to write and represent our numbers. We're going back to that standard form we talked about. Now, standard is the usual, the norm, the way we're used to seeing numbers written, and that's by using digits. To write a whole number in standard form, write the number or write the name of each, we're going to change this. Write the number in each period, followed by a comma. Now, we're not writing the name, that's silly, that's word form, but we're writing the digit, the number in each period. And then remember, we fill it in with that super important comma to separate our periods. So let's start our translations. The first one we have here, we would read that as 41. I notice there is no period, so there's no comma. We only put a comma, or well, there is a period, but there's no other period besides the ones period. So we don't include a comma. We would just write this as 41. The next one, 708. Again, I don't see a period name, so that means I'm in the ones period. I'm not going to include a comma because I'm not moving over to any other periods. So we would just write this as 708. Now, let's make it a little harder. Now I have a period or a comma, so that means I am using more than one period. So I'm going to start and read this. I've got 6,000 and then a comma. Now remember, the word thousand tells me the period I'm in. So I'm not going to write 6,000, comma, 493. That's just silly. Nope. Cross that out. That's not what we're writing. It's 6 and we're in the thousands place. Now, when you see a period name, replace that name with a comma. So I'm going to write 6, and then instead of the word thousand, I'm going to write a comma. Next, I have 493. That is all within one section. Right there, 493. There are no commas within that section, so I'm going to write that all together. 93. Let's fix that. 6,493. There we go. All right. Now, before I show you, I want you to try the next one on your own. Go ahead and write it in pencil, of course, on the line below. The number is 3,746,520. Now, first we're going to identify our period names. So I see commas. That gives me my hint. That tells me where the different periods are separated. So first I look for my commas, and then I look for the names in front of the commas. So here we have the millions period right in front of the comma, and the thousands period right in front of the comma, and then no more commas, so that must mean this is the ones period. Now that I know my periods, I can write my digits a little bit easier. I'm going to read whatever number is in front of the period name. So the first one is 3. And then million. Now remember, when it's a period name, I replace it with a comma. So I'm going to write 3 million. Next up, 746. And it's in front of the word thousand. So I'm going to replace that word thousand with another comma. So I'm going to write 746,000. And the last section is 520. There are no more commas, so we're going to write 520. And that is the end of our number. So now we have correctly represented 3,746,520. Moving on. We're going to talk about the third way to represent our numbers and understand what they're worth, what the value is worth. The third way we can represent the value is by writing a number in expanded form. The expanded form of a number shows each digit of the number with its place value. Each digit of the number with the place value that we've identified. And remember, we look at the commas to know what place value we are in. So let's look at an example. Here we got some blue boxes representing how to turn a regular number in standard form, like 5,672, into expanded form. There are a couple ways to do this, or a couple ways to think about this. So first you take the digit in each position. So the first digit is 5. So we take the digit 5, and then we represent the rest of the number by remembering the place value of that 5. That 5 is in the thousands place. Now we know the thousands place has 3 place values after it. The hundreds, the tens, and the ones. So the thousands is always going to have 3 zeros after it. So that's how we get 5,000. We're representing the digit and then the place value it's in. We are stretching out the number to represent what each digit is truly worth. That 5 is worth, it has a value of 5,000 because the 5 is in the thousands place. Now, a trick to make sure you get your zeros correct, because that's where I see a lot of mistakes happen. Students who accidentally write the wrong number of zeros. Always be suspicious of zeros. To make sure you have the correct number of zeros in your expanded form, look to see how many digits follow the place value you're in. So here we had the 5, and after the 5, we had 1, 2, 3 place values. So we need to replace each digit in those place values with a 0. So the 6 became a 0, the 7 became a 0, the 2 became a 0. I have 1, 2, 3 place values after the number, the digit I'm talking about. So I have 3 zeros in my expanded form my expanded form value. So let's move on to the next digit. It is a 6, and it is in the ones, tens, hundreds place. So we're going to write the 6, we keep that, and then we replace everything after it with a 0 to represent the hundreds. We know any number in the hundreds is going to have 2 place values after that digit. So this would be 600. 2 digits after the 6, 2 zeros. I'm good. I'm going to move on now. The next one, the digit we're looking at is the 7. So the next digit in the number is a 7, and it's in the tens place. Now, the tens place usually has, or always has, 1 place value following it. So a number in the tens, when we write it in an expanded form, is going to have 1 0 after the digit. So 70, or the 7 turns into 7D. And the last digit was 2, and it's in the ones place, so we don't add any zeros. We just keep it as 2 ones, which is represented by 2. So we had 7 tens, that was 70, 6 hundreds, 600, and 5 thousands, 5,000. Now let's try some. So we're going to write each standard form number in expanded form. Looking below, we have the number. Well, before we can correctly write it in expanded form, we want to make sure we are recognizing our periods correctly so we have the right place value when we expand it. So I see 2 commas. I know that the first comma represents the thousands place, and the second comma represents the millions period, And then let's look at each individual digit and the value it represents. So this is a 5 in the millions place. So I'm going to write a 5 and then a comma, and then I'm going to replace every digit after it with a 0. That's 1, 2, 3, comma, 1, 2, 3 more. And that represents my first digit. The 5 in the millions place has a value of 5 million. So then we separate it with a plus sign and move on to the next digit. It's a 2 in the hundred thousands place. So it's 200,000. I'm going to write the 2, and then I'm going to count 1, 2, comma, so 2 zeros, comma, 1, 2, 3, 3 zeros after. So 200,000 plus. Now there's a 0 in the 10,000s place. I do not have to write anything because a 0 has no value. If I have 0 10,000s, I have 0. I have nothing. If I say, hey, I'm going to give you 0 $10,000 bills, well, I'm giving you nothing. So I don't write anything. I move on to the next digit, which is a 7 in the thousands place. And the 7 is right before the comma. So I'm going to write a 7, then the comma, and then I should have 1, 2, 3 zeros after it. Moving on, plus sign, another 0, so I'm going to skip it. I've got a 3 in the tens place, so I write the 3, no commas, and there's 1 digit after the 3, so 1, 0. And the last one is 4, so I'm just going to write a 4. That is my expanded form. So now I want you to go ahead, press pause, and try the next one before we go over it together. Go ahead and press pause now. All right, so you just did this one on your own. Let's see if you did it correct. I've got a 4 in the millions place, so I'm going to write 4 million. So you should have 6 zeros after the 4. Count them, make sure you have exactly 6. Then we have the plus sign, 0, so we skip it. A 2 in the 10,000s place, so that's 2 10,000s, which is 20,000. I have a 2, then another place value, so I write a 0, then the comma, and 3 more zeros, 20,000. Then I have a 3 in the hundreds place, so I write 300, no commas, and a 1 in the ones place, so I write 1. I skipped over all the zeros because they had no value. All right, let's move on. The last section we're going to go over is how to read tables. Now, tables you're going to see everywhere. You just might not realize it. When you look at a menu at a restaurant, that is a table. So imagine going to Chipotle and not knowing how to read a table correctly. You might think you're ordering a taco for $5, but you might accidentally be ordering a family size of tacos for $50. So that's a big difference. Or if you think you're ordering a burrito and they give you a salad, well, I don't know about you, but I'd be bummed out. So reading a table is not just applicable to menus, it's all over real life. Now, reading a table is important because tables are often used to organize and display facts that contain numbers. So you will probably see many tables in your other classes as well. English, science, even dance if you're studying for a test and need to understand the different positions, you will see tables everywhere, and they are used to represent facts that contain numbers. Now, a couple things we want to remember. The columns of a table, that is a key word, columns. Columns run vertically. Think about the columns holding up a building. You often hear columns in architecture. A column is vertical, going straight up. Rows, those run horizontally. So those run side to side. So when you're reading left to right, you're following a row. When you're looking top to bottom, you're following a column. To read a table, we look at the intersection of a column and a row, where they cross paths. So the following table shows the countries that won the most medals during the Summer Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil in 2016. Take a look. We have the title, 2016 Rio de Janeiro Summer Olympics medal count. Always read your title. It's important to know what your table is representing. Then we have our columns. The first column lists the countries: United States, China, Great Britain, Russian Federation, Germany, France, and so on. The following columns seem to represent the different medals: gold, silver, bronze, and the total number of medals. If we add up all three, 46 plus 37 plus 38 equals 121. Now, we read from left to right. That's important. Just like you would read in a book. You read from left to right along the row marked France. Do it with me. Here's France. So we go left to right, and it wants to know how many gold medals they won. Well, the first column we come across is the gold medals. So I go to France and gold. Might make more sense if I go like this. I go gold down, France over, and it's 10 medals. So now look and see how many silver medals did they win. Well, I'm still on the France row, but I go to the silver column now, and they won 18 silver medals. And then the bronze medals, I keep going, France over to the bronze column, and that's 14. In total, they won 42 medals altogether. Now, how many silver medals did Germany win during the 2016 Summer Olympic Games? First, find Germany in the table. Now, where in the table? In the left-hand column. Then you're going to read in what direction? From left to right until the silver column is reached. So let's go to Germany, and we're going to go from left to right until we get to the silver column right there. So that tells us Germany won 10 silver medals. Now go ahead and try and answer the last part on your own before we go over it. The countries that won more than 60 medals. More than 60 medals. Which countries won more than 60 medals? Now they didn't say gold, silver, or bronze, so they want to know which one won 60 medals total. All right, try and identify those first, and then we'll go over it together. Okay, So let's look to find how many countries won more than 60 medals. Let's look at the totals. Now we see the first total is 121. So that is the United States. Let's keep following the totals down, and we notice they're going in descending order. So the next one is 70, and that is China. Continue on. The next one is still more than 70. Oops, there we go. More than 70. So we wrote down United States and China. So let's go back up here. We had United States, China, Great Britain, 67. That's, I've been saying 70. I'm sorry, guys, if I'm confusing you. So we want to know which countries won more than 60 medals total. So we identified the first one was 121 medals. That was the United States. Then 70 medals. That's more than 60. So that was China. The next one is 67. That's more than 60. So that is Great Britain. Great Britain. So those are the 3 countries that won more than 60 medals. Now, to make sure I included all of them, I'm going to check the next one. It's 56. 56 is less than 60. So these are the only 3 that are more than 60 medals total. All right, what are you going to do next? You are going to start your homework. I have posted pictures of the questions, so if you do not have a textbook at home, you can just look on Veracross and see the questions. You are going to answer each question completely and on a separate sheet of paper. The questions must be numbered, just like we practiced in class, and all your work must be shown. So remember that template we went over, how you're going to set up your paper. You're going to put your name, date, and period. You're going to put the name of the assignment, which is right here. This is the assignment name. And then you're going to make sure to show all of your work. So your homework is in the textbook. It is pages 13 through 16. So 13, 14, 15, and 16. You're going to do question numbers 6 through 14 even. So what does that mean? You're only doing 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. Then you're going to do number 21, 28, then 50 through 54 even, like we did here. Count every other one all the way up to 54. And then 59 to 65 odd. So that will be 59, 61, 63, and 65. All right. So if you still have some class time left, go ahead and start your homework now. I will be grading it when I return, so make sure to do it completely. If you have any questions, email me. Remember, my email is agoldberg@oapb.org. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for your cooperation. I miss you. I can't wait to be back with you. In the meantime, have a great rest of your day. I will see you soon.